Welcome once again to the official MUFON podcast. I'm Richard Beckwith. Tonight, my guest is multiple award-winning filmmaker and Emmy-nominated casting director Craig Campobasso. After graduating from high school at age 17, Craig went to work behind the scenes on blockbuster film classics like Frank Herbert's Dune and two Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Conan the Destroyer and Total Recall. He began his casting career on Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories and received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Casting for a series on David E. Kelley's Picket Fences. Craig's casting career spans 3 decades. Craig directed, wrote, and produced the short film Stranger at the Pentagon, which was adapted from the popular UFO book authored by the late Dr. Frank E. Stranges. After production, the short film collected accolades. In September 2014, it won Best Sci-Fi Film at the Burbank International Film Festival, selling out all 275 seats, a first for the festival. In 2015, it won a Remmy Award for the WorldFest Houston International Film Festival for Best Sci-Fi Short. Craig has appeared on many radio shows, including Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. He's also been a guest on the Open Minds talk show with Regina Meredith and Beyond Belief, hosted by George Norrie on Gaia. Craig has also appeared on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. We are honored to have him here on the podcast tonight. Craig Campobasso, welcome to the MUFON podcast.
How you doing, Richard?
Well, I'm doing really well. As you know from our pre-interview ordeal.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've had you on, and it's actually it's been a while since I've done a podcast, and people wondered about that, and so had some things going on, but those things have resolved themselves now, and I'm glad you're my first guest. I enjoyed having you on last time some months ago, and you wrote a book that we talked about back then,
Yes.
the Extraterrestrial Species Compendium. Is that what it was?
The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac.
Yeah.
The ultimate guide to greys, reptilians, hybrids, and Nordics.
But you've got a new one. You've got a new one now.
I got a new one. There we go. The UFO Hotspot Compendium. All the places to visit before you die or are abducted.
So tell us about that. I have to tell you that I have never actually seen what I would call a UFO. I have a lot of friends that, like you do. We have a lot of mutual friends because we deal in this arena, in these weird circles.
Yes.
And so we know people that have seen and had experiences, and I'm assuming that you have as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have not. I've never, I can't say that I have looked up and thought, well, I've looked up a couple of times and thought, oh my God, I'm looking at a real UFO here. But as it turns out, more often than not, that it was just something that can be explained. So,
Right.
so before you tell us about the UFO hotspots, because I've been to a couple myself, and I don't know if they purposefully avoid me. I've even gone with people who are known to attract them. You know what I'm saying? And so and scientifically speaking, I'm not sure that actually happens. But I want you, Craig, to tell me about your most thrilling UFO experience, if you've had one.
Well, I think my most thrilling was I go to Sedona a lot, and there you can see lots of things. You can hear amazing stories from the locals, things like that, especially if you go to a vortex. I like to go to Bell Rock. It's a very strong male psychic vortex. The first time I went there on the way home, I started seeing visions and everything. I mean, it really opens you up. But on one of my visits, I was driving from town towards Bell Rock and Courthouse Butte. They're side by side. And coming along the side of the road was a big, round, metallic orb flying towards me, right? Almost at my eye level. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. I fumbled. I got my phone and I think I got off 3 shots of it. Right. So I actually got it on film. It's actually in the UFO hotspots under Sedona. Um, so to me, those are the probes, right? Because they're kind of coming around, taking pictures, samples, whatever they want that probe to do. But it was amazing. It was just, and it was in broad daylight and the whole thing. Another
Wow.
time, actually on Bell Rock, and I remember it. It was 1998. Um, I went with a friend, and he was taking pictures of me, and in the pictures were gigantic orbs that came up to my shoulder. One of the orbs was all bumped up against the side of my body, and inside it was all milky white. Inside it had patterns, right? And then in other shots, they were in different fluxes of different kind of patterns with sort of like a rainbow wash to them as well. That same year, those same giant orbs appeared with the same friend in Santa Monica, but they were differently patterned in Santa Monica. When I was shooting Stranger at the Pentagon, the short film, um, we caught one giant orb up in the soundstage, right? Before we started shooting and during. But a lot of times in the photos, when we would take it, we would get what you call an orb storm. There were so many orbs, they're just layered one on top of each other, right? So to me, those are souls coming to hang out and see what's going on. So I,
Let me ask you this: why?
yeah,
What would you say to those who would say to you, "Well, that's you're probably seeing dust.
oh,
You're in
yeah.
a in a dust friendly location." What would you say to those folks? Because you know that they're out there. I mean, they're guys like me.
Well, there is, but when you see this, when you take a picture, right? When you're taking several pictures and they turn out just fine with no dust in them,
Yeah.
and then you take a picture and all of a sudden it's gone into the next dimension, and you can see it. It's for some reason, like at what's the hotel that Stephen King went to where he wrote The Shining?
Oh yeah, the
In
Overlook Hotel.
Colorado.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Overlook is that. I
So,
think is what they
right.
call it. Yeah.
So when you go into the basement, right, they show you where the portal is, right? And it's this sort of indentation in the rock, and it's where the employees come and go. You take your phone like this, right? You look at it, you're not seeing anything. You put your phone like this, and there's hundreds of orbs flying in and out of the portal. So that's not dust. But the thing is that we have the giant orbs that
Mhm.
have patterns. Dust that there's no giant dust ball that's gonna do that and give you a pattern. So I gave them to the psychic Sylvia Brown, and I said, "What do you think these are?" She goes, "Oh, those are angels." She says, "Those are angelic." And I gave it to a few other psychics just to see what they said, and they said the same exact thing. And as we know, when I was doing Stranger at the Pentagon, Valiant Thor isn't angelic. So I'm sure that could have been his energy signature up there
I
as
have a
well.
question about Valiant Thor.
Sure.
And I don't know if we talked about this last time, but there are various photographs of purportedly a valiant Thor. And in one or two of them, he's blonde, has very almost white hair, and others he's dark and almost has a Pierce Brosnan look about him. And so, my question is, are any of the purported photographs of Valiant Thor what you would think are authentic? Are they
Yes.
okay? And I think this had to do as well with your association of some individuals who had actually worked with Valiant Thor. Is that correct?
Right. Well, Dr. Frank Stranges,
Right.
who met him in 1959 all the way up and through to his death in 2008, was in communication with him and his crew.
So what was
So
so which one of those or which one or which groups or which one of those individuals is more
this
uh,
this is Valiant Thor right
yeah, the
here.
Pierce Brosnan looking guy. That's
That's
the
it.
one I was
That's
thinking of.
Dawn. That's Dawn, his vice commander there. And this is Jill. She's the wife of another vice commander named Zan, right? So this is Valiant Thor. Now, where the confusion comes in is, I can't, I remember, was it Phil Schneider did an on, they filmed it, they put it on, and he was saying this big military looking guy was Valiant Thor. Well, that's not Valiant Thor. I mean, this is the Valiant Thor that Dr. Frank talked about. I had met two other women that met Valiant Thor, and I actually said to them too. I said, "Is this the man that you met in the picture I just showed you, or is it this man?" Showing the picture that Phil did, and they all said it was this man.
Okay.
So I don't know where or why he got that information, or maybe he was told, or what have you. But other people have been sort of visited in the dream state and things like that. And it is this Valiant Thor. Now, these pictures were taken at Howard Menger's farm, who was a contactee um, back in the 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
Howard has passed away. His wife, Connie, who lived in 95, I went and visited with her in Vero Beach many, many years ago. She was 95 at the time. She passed away. But that what happened on the day that these photos were taken, he was having a UFO lecture. Valiant Thor brought along Dawn and Jill because they were very interested in hearing what people on the ground were saying, right? Because Howard was going on the circuit, talking about it and things like that. And so there was a ex military photographer there who was also a UFO amateur named August Roberts. Now, August took probably about 250 photos that day with his camera. And when he saw these three, they stood out like a sore thumb, and he felt different around them. He felt exhilarated. He felt like his energy rose. And so he focused a lot of the pictures on them. I think those that have survived, probably that's around 15 to 20 photos. Some of them, the one I showed you, that is really one of the clearest photos. But
Uh-huh.
we don't have a full, we do have one that's a full front of his face, but it's so whited out from the sunlight, uh it doesn't look so good. Now, how does Howard know that they're not from here because they look just like us?
Yes.
Is they will approach him and give him a special handshake, and if he receives the handshake, he knows that they're not from here. So when this lecture was over, August went to Howard and said, "Did that man give you the handshake?" And he said, "Yes, he was a visitor." So, and August was friends with Dr. Frank. He went and he developed the photos and then went to Dr. Frank's house with the photos and told him the story. That's how Dr. Frank got the photos. And then maybe about a year later, in 1959, Dr. Frank was brought to Washington, D.C. to speak at a church for 2 weeks, right? Um, so he was a preacher. And so on the particular night that he spoke about UFOs in the Bible, right, which was the most fascinating topic of all, a woman approached him, an African American woman, and she pulled out her Pentagon badge and took him in the back room. And Dr. Frank had a photo of Valiant Thor up on his board, and she had pointed to it and she said, "He wants to meet you." And Dr. Frank was very taken back. And she said, "I will pick you up at your hotel in the morning." She brought him to the Pentagon. She got him through the two guard posts, brought him to an undisclosed room where he met and talked with him for the very first time. Now, me knowing the story very well, I see all of the synchronicities that are happening because by this time, they had already turned down Valiant Thor's proposal, which was to help humanity, to uh, eliminate poverty, disease, prolong life, get rid of atomics, go into free energy, all of these things.
And what was the deal breaker?
Well, the deal breaker was it would put doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies out of business and the economy would crash. So that was the official no. But by this time, I believe because he saw how open Dr. Frank was, I think that he called him there because Dr. Frank became the grassroots campaign to tell the world that he came here to do this divine design with our government, right? And it is said that he continued even after the Eisenhower administration. I know that he still talked to Nixon at certain times and things like that. Nixon was very different when he was vice president to the time where he became president. He pretty much was Valiant Thor's contact. Um, and he would ask him lots of personal questions about the universe. That's another reason why he came, to sort of bring them into the fold of what's out there, right? How does it work? Everything. And I remember Dr. Frank telling me, when Nixon, resigned, that Valiant Thor told him, he said, "Look, Nixon didn't do anything that any other president didn't do. He just got caught," right?
Right.
Because they all do it, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not much into politics or anything like that, but I found that's interesting. I've had many people who were in that. I had a Secret Service man contact me who was back there in the day. He said, "I just have to tell you, the story is true." There was another guy who had a radio show, and he would always say, "We have to talk on the side." He was in the CIA. He said, "I'm telling you, it's true." I've met other people in positions that I can't say who have come and talked with me and said, "We're just telling you the story is true."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Many people have said that, other people who have seen him. I mean, I just cleaned my office. I have to tell you, Richard. And I found a letter from a woman who said that in the early days, her grandfather was in the military and that Valiant Thor used to come over to their house, and she told me little stories, and she said there are pictures, but I tried to get those pictures, but the contact just stopped because I think she had to go through her grandma or whatever. I don't know. But now that I refound it, I'm going to see if I can reconnect with her, because it would just be fascinating to see. One of the other ladies who saw him um, actually saw him with Dr. Frank when Valiant went out one night to a UFO group
Hmm.
that were UFO hunting, and he spoke to them and and talked to them. And she said, back at that time, was the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And that they were so terrified. And he said not to worry, that that was one of the reasons he was here, to make sure that things like that don't happen. So and another woman met him twice in 1 week, all in these early times, in the early 60s, even when he left the Pentagon after his 3-year tenure there, from 1957 to 1960, March 16th to March 16th.
Hmm.
He went away for a year and he came back, and he's been here ever since. So he's not leaving, he's here for the duration, to make sure the planet moves out of duality and into becoming fully conscious, so that we can rejoin that universal society that is out there. That, by the way, lives on the interior of planets, not the exterior.
Well, would you agree with the notion that that the Earth itself is a conscious entity, that planets and
Yes.
stars and those sorts of things are also in and of themselves conscious on a certain level?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the sun as well.
Uh, so let's talk about where all these folks out here can go see a UFO, because people that are,
Okay.
you know, now you have to tell me where to go.
Okay.
Okay,
I will
I can
tell you.
well, I can
I
tell you
will tell you.
I've been to some kind of crazy places. I live about 100 miles north of Skinwalker. I'm not very far
Ah,
from Skinwalker. I've been just a couple of years ago. I went to the San Luis Valley with some friends of mine. Actually, a friend of mine that I met when we formed a little thing called the Institute for Human Cosmic Interaction with Dr. Sprinkle, and we went down there and with another friend of mine that I worked with on the Disclosure Project, or the Orion Project, with Dr. Greer, an engineer, and didn't see nothing. Well,
right,
that's a double negative. I didn't see anything.
right, right. Well,
And I'm always hedging my bet. I'm always taking people along with me that I'm thinking, this is I'm hedging my bet here. We're gonna see a UFO for sure. But I think I'm starting to feel like perhaps they want to avoid me. But where do we go? Where do folks go?
they're not going to avoid you. Eventually, you will see them. But let me first just tell you how the book came about.
Yeah.
Is so MUFON contacted me after the success of the other book, and they said, we want to do a thing where we send out a thing to all the MUFON state directors to pick their favorite hotspots. So
Oh yeah.
then they sent all those to me. I compiled them. I added a few of my own, and then I worked with several of the MUFON investigators that were with those particular things. So, the cool thing about the book is you get the when, the where. Hang on, let me just get it here, and then things to do when you're there, right? And it gives you what you should do, what you'll need, and where do you have to call, right? And then you get all the contact for that, and then you get actually the sources. So if there was somebody like Chris Stiles, uh, who helped me with the Shag Harbor, right? Because he was
Uh-huh.
the MUFON investigator on that. Chris has a book out. It'll tell you what the name of Chris's book is and where you can get it, right? So anyway, so that's how the book came about. Now, I saw, like I told you, I saw the orb in Sedona.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is really you need night vision binoculars, right? Because when you look through those and you see up high and higher in the sky, you will see them trekking across the sky like this, and they're gone. And an airplane just goes like this, very slow. But they're way up higher. Sometimes you'll see a group of them. Um, and but the place that we sort of call the galactic airport is at ESETI Ranch in Washington, right?
Yeah.
So um, when you go there, it's across from Mount Adams. There's lots of paranormal, strange lights and things. There's Bigfoots in the area. Um, all kinds of phenomena that go on there. Um, and so they have a set of binoculars that people that go there, can share and look up. And when they spot them or they spot a group of them, they take their laser pointer, point it so everybody can see, and then they mentally connect to the actual UFO and they will say power up. And when they say power up, then the lights go way out, right? And then they'll say move to the left, move to the right, and you'll see the ship actually doing that right there. Now, I saw that when I was there. Many other people I know that have gone have seen that too. I've done that in Sedona as well. Now, have I seen one that's right across the street from me, like hovering really low? No, I haven't seen anything up that close except for the probe, right?
Right.
The metallic probe. Now, other people I know have seen these ships. I write about it in the Pine. Is it Pine? What's the thing up in Pine Bush? Is it Pine Bush? So anyway, it's there's a gentleman actually who I know who lives up in upstate New York, and he used to see. Now he believes that these were actual government craft, right? Um, because he would see these manta ray looking things that would come out every single night. They would send an airplane out to sort of see if people were around, right? Because it's a upstate. Everyone pretty much goes to bed early. Nobody's out late or anything like that. So he used to go out and he would cover himself in, you know, one of those metallic blankets so that they couldn't see the body signature. And then he would film them, right? And they look like manta ray looking black things. And a lot of those were reported during that time in Pine Bush. It is Pine Bush.
Uh-huh.
And that whole area, that's where Whitley Strieber lived when he was abducted,
Ah,
right?
yes.
A lot of people knew that a base was being built underground because they heard it being built all the time, every single day and at night as well. So, but this same individual on two separate occasions saw a different kind of ship that literally was across the street just hovering. And he said, I just stood there, I just sat there in my car and stared at it. And he said, and this one particular night, I decided to follow it. And I was following it, but then it went over the golf course. And he said, I was going really fast, to keep up with it. But then it went over the golf course. And he said, there's heavy fines for driving on a golf course. So that's where he kind of stopped. And a police officer, caught up with him, and he said, why are you speeding, blah blah blah. He told him the story, which he thought he would just you know take him in to the station as a nut job. And he said, oh, they're back, like that. He goes, okay, have a good night, and just let him go. So evidently even they knew you know, about these kinds of things that were there. But it's more and more if people really investigate and see, I mean, in the beginning, like Daniel Fry, all these guys got great pictures of the ships and, the oh, I can't remember the Umites is a race where there was a guy who was photographed. He's 8 feet tall. They primarily were in Italy, and what they came for was to where a lot of races come to go to individuals to raise their consciousness. They decided to actually write letters to scientists that were working on certain things to help them along,
Mhm.
and that's what they did. And one of their crafts was photographed. It was dish shaped.
The
uh,
Umites.
Ummites, Ummites.
Now,
Yeah,
now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me I recall that particular term, and it was a term used for this extraterrestrial race of beings, and I think it was in the context of the Italian friendship cases, and the
yeah,
Umites were purportedly soulless beings. But they
no.
is that
Well, this
I guess I'm thinking of the wrong Umites.
well, I've never heard of them being soulless, but
Uh,
I did see the photograph of the 8 foot guy.
uh-huh.
Right, he looks like a normal human. He's just gigantic. Um, but he didn't look soulless to me. I never heard that they were soulless.
And we
So
may be talking about the same group of cases, the friendship cases in Italy,
yeah,
where they had this group of humanoid folks that were, for all intents and purposes, human, but they ranged in size from like the individual you're talking about to down to about a meter in height. Um, there's a
wow.
there's a documentary out there called "The Friendship Cases" about all of that, and maybe I wouldn't be surprised if those are related. So tell me, where do most folks go when they when they want to see a hotspot? What's the most visited hotspot where people go?
Well, the most visited is Giant Rock and the Integratron, which are out in the Yucca Valley. Um, if nobody knows the story of George Van Tassel, long story short, there was a gentleman who he knew who used to run the Giant Rock Airport, which was basically a dirt landing pad in the middle of nowhere, right? By similar, just over the mountains from a military base. George moved him and his family out there. They lived under the rock and the Giant Rock, the biggest freestanding boulder on Earth, they say. And about he began channeling under the rock in 52. I actually in the book put in a few of those channelings. He was the very first person to channel Ashtar. That's where Ashtar originated from. And interestingly enough, one of my longtime dearest friends was with him this entire time.
Uh-huh.
So I got firsthand account of what went down, right? That type of thing from her.
Uh-huh.
So
Including the building of the Integratron, right?
and including the building of the Integratron.
Cool.
So, which I thought was really good. And then, one night he was sleeping out on a cot and he heard a noise and he got up and he saw uh, a gentleman approaching him. He was about 5'6", blonde, short blonde hair, and dressed in a what we would call maybe a space uniform, something of that nature. And he introduced himself as Salganda. George is very into how objects fly because he worked for McDonnell Douglas, Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes used to fly his little plane out there into the desert and go and have burgers, his wife's burgers and apple pie, because they had a little restaurant for visitors called the Come On In, right?
Uh,
And so he basically comes with the same information that Valiant Thor is coming with years later about how to rejuvenate your cells so that you will stay youthful, you will never be sick. It's how they do it. It's a cellular rejuvenation, and that's what the Integratron's basis was. So he gave him the blueprints on how to build it. Took George many, many years to raise the money for it. Howard Hughes gave him like 20 or 25 grand to start. And and when it was about 95% finished, Saul Gonda told George that the world wasn't ready for it yet, right? So George didn't activate it, but then he passed away, and there's all kinds of rumors that the government came in and took all his paperwork and all kinds of stuff. I don't know if that's true, but if you've ever been to the Integratron, you know it has the most amazing vibrational energy signature ever. I
Yeah,
mean,
from what I understand, I haven't been there, but from what I understand, the acoustics are just amazing. It would be a great place to like record an album, for example. I don't know if musicians have done that, but
they have. Moby has. Moby
ah,
has. He's done concerts out there.
wow,
As a matter of fact, one time when I was there getting a sound bath, beforehand, they announced, they said, well, we have the Gregorian chanters from Italy here, and they
wow,
would like to sing for you. And so they all stood at various places. My,
oh
my whole
wow.
body is going through chills right now because it
Well,
was the
it
most
is me too because I love Gregorian
incredible.
chants.
Uh,
I love to listen to Gregorian chants. I know that sounds crazy.
yeah,
Not a lot of people do that, but I
yeah.
do. And I'll listen, especially if I'm painting or something like that. I'll listen to Gregorian chants. I just love this. I can't imagine how awesome that would sound in the Integratron.
Well, the reason why it sounds awesome is because, like, if I'm on one side of the Integratron and you're on the other, I would go like this. And on the other side, you'd hear Richard, right?
Wow,
So when they're chanting, it's like you're in this multi-dimensional encasing and you start to float with the music. That's why that sound bath with the bowls, like you literally feel like you're levitating,
wow.
right? Because that sound chamber is unbelievable. So anyway, that's what So that's one of my favorite spots. We People have seen a lot of things there. Make sure that if anybody listening goes in the book, it will tell you where to go, what to do. You can't just show up and walk in. You have to have an appointment for a sound bath. If you want to go to Giant Rock, I have the historian of Giant Rock, Barbara Harris. Um, you can you can hire her for a nominal fee. She can take you out there at night to go sky watching. You can sit in chairs and look, with the binoculars and all that stuff. If you're going to Sedona, I also have another person who's into all the UFO stuff. She has 6 pairs of night vision binoculars. So when she
Yeah,
takes
because
you out,
those things aren't cheap. If you want to get a really
no,
good
they're expensive.
fourth or fifth generation night vision goggles, you're talking, or just a scope, you're
Yeah,
talking big big money. Well, for a guy like me,
yeah.
pretty cheap, but
Well, look, no, they're expensive. They're thousands. They're very, very expensive.
right.
So
You
what's
want a buddy that has some.
you do. But that's the one thing that I like, about hiring. I'm sure Melinda Leslie. She lives there, so she has 6 pairs. She's got the chairs, and she takes you out to a thing, and then points it out, and you get to look at them there. But I would say in Sedona, the most unique paranormal UFO property is the Bradshaw Ranch. Now, um, Skinwalker Ranch did 2 episodes on the Bradshaw Ranch on their little offshoot show,
Yeah.
right? I had Ison, she's still alive, one of my dear friends, she's in her 80s now. She actually worked at the Bradshaw Ranch when it was a working ranch. So I have heard the stories of this ranch for years and years and years. And she said, when they used to just do horseback riding and stuff for people, and then they Bob Bradshaw decided to start doing rodeo shows, covered wagon shows, and the first night that it opened, that an actual ship flew right across, right over them, right when the show started. And she said, I was sitting there and I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And, and then she talks about, that there is a albino Sasquatch, which they called Big Girl. And Bob's wife, Linda, decided to try a few things. And so she would leave some fruit and vegetables on a plate out by the corrals. And in the morning, it would all be eaten and there would be gifting on the plate from the Bigfoot, right? Sticks, stones, things like that. So, so I went a little step further, and I contacted Tom Dongo, who's a ufologist there, who knows everything that's going on in Sedona. He's written many, many books. When I first started going there, I was like, we'd go to the local bookstore and pray. He had a new book, so I could read all the latest stuff. And he actually investigated the ranch. Linda had called him, I think it was for 3 or 4 years. And the phenomena that's on the ranch, so they have a giant windmill, and people who are near the windmill or meditate by the windmill will have missing time, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. Um, that He did talk about Big Girl, and at a certain point, Big Girl was pregnant, and she had laid down in the dirt to show on her side, to show Linda that she was pregnant because Linda's mare was pregnant. And Tom was receiving calls from all the ranchers saying that aliens were taking their mare's fetuses, right? So he warned Linda, but she would always find the white hairs on her mare's belly. So she assumed that, Big Girl was looking after her mare at night as well. And then, of course, she did have her baby, and then they would find not only her Bigfoot, but little, baby Bigfoot feet as well. Another night, so Linda talked about this tree, this alligator tree, which is set off to the side of the house, right?
Hmm.
And that was a portal tree. And it was a portal that brought in good energies and bad energies. So they never knew what they were going to get, right? And one night, they were in the living room and they heard the dogs going wild. And she went out there and they were barking at nothing, but they were looking up as if something was there. And she got the dogs in the house. And and she heard hissing when she was out there, which really freaked her out. So in the morning when they went out there, they found reptilian footprints. So and by the way, Tom has it all documented
Hmm.
as well in his book
I
as
take
well.
it. I take it that is this your favorite place to go? Is Sedona? Do you have particular place in Sedona that you like to go, or is that just the general area of Sedona? That's kind of where you like to go.
Well, I like to go to the vortexes, particularly Bell Rock, and I do like going out to Bradshaw Ranch. You can walk around it. You can see what it is. When I was speaking earlier this year at Contact in the Desert, I met a couple who live in Sedona, and they go out there all the time, and they stay out there at night, and they said that you can hear the Bigfoot calls, and that they have photographed a lot of different kinds of strange phenomena out there as well. Um, I mean, there's so much that goes on with that. And by the way, this I thought was interesting. Linda's son, who um, who was in his 20s at the time. By the way, when you're coming in, it's all dirt, so you have to have a four-wheel drive.
Hmm.
It's terrifying at night because you don't know what's going to jump out of those bushes, right? And you can feel it. You can feel the dimensions warbling. You can actually feel it. It's a very freaky. Everything when I went told me, get the hell out of there. But I pushed forward because I wanted to have the experience. But what was interesting, he was coming back with a friend late at night, and what walked in front of him was an animal standing on all fours with a shoulder height of approximately 4 feet. The animal appeared to be a cross between a cat and a horse. Um, the head resembled a cat's. It was very large with definite cat eyes, cat ears, and a cat mouth turned down, and yet it had very long hairs all over its face. The legs were extremely long, and the back appeared to be a bit humped. The tail was similar to a horse's tail, and the body hair hung almost to the ground. It stood for a moment glaring at the car, and then turned and walked slowly off into the night. But what was interesting is after the animal was seen, someone in another state reported seeing the exact same animal during that time. So, it's like, are they walking through portals and going to different areas?
Well, I was
Or,
gonna ask you about that because
yeah,
that's the ongoing sort of, I guess, consensus or direction that they seem to be going relative to Skinwalker. So, do you think that's what's happening here? We're talking about interdimensional portals.
yes, I think that's probably it, because when you're there, you really do feel the dimensions. I mean, you feel them separately, and you can feel things in them looking at you.
What are they? Are they alternate realities? Coming from the basically occupying the same space, perhaps on a different dimensional or vibrational level, or are they visitors from afar who have found a way to travel here through for example a wormhole, for lack of a better example, travel from one part of the universe to the other, and there's just I keep thinking of Deep Space Nine. It's a stable wormhole,
Right.
something of that nature. What do you think?
Well, when they were there, her son had a video camera, right? And if he would be looking straight ahead, you see what is before you. But when he looked through the lens and he filmed it, one time it was a total different reality. There were dinosaurs, right? And then another time it was big girl walking with a silver disc above her head, right? And then another time there was a bunch of regular pigs, which they don't have in Sedona. All they have is wild javelinas, right? Which they thought was interesting. And another time, all they saw was a telephone pole. So there's all these different kind of realities going on. When I went to North Carolina with another friend of mine, we went to go visit Chris Bledsoe, who has the book out, UFO of God, right now, which is doing very well. It's a very high profile case. took me down to the Cape Fear River, showed me where everything happened, where he was abducted, the whole thing. We went back to the house that he was living in because they abandoned that house, right? Because when him and his young son got home, the rest of the family wasn't home. After this ordeal late at night, the beings were walking out of the forest in his backyard towards the house. And so I heard the story from Chris, from his son as well, right? And so I had a Minolta camera, and as he was talking, I just started taking photographs in the forest. And the next day, when I was going through them, I got the being on camera. Yeah, and it was tall. Its legs ended where our knees are. It only had little short legs, very long torso, thin neck, oval head. And when
Not a
it
very
was
fast runner, I'm guessing.
not a very fast runner, but what was interesting is he was holding a light like this in one hand, right? And then when we enhanced the photo, we could see that he was wearing goggles. And immediately I knew that that light was an interdimensional light, and those goggles were for him to see interdimensionally. Now, people have Chris has gotten lots of phenomena over the years on tape, but even Chris said, he said the being allowed you to take its picture, right? So I actually put it in the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac at the end of the book
Mhm.
as the unknown alien. So it's, I think, we just don't understand. I think it depends on
Perspective, right?
perspective and that kind of thing. I mean, I know when we, let's say at night, if we astral travel and we go somewhere else, I mean, we're in another dimension. Our spirit, our soul has gone somewhere else in a different reality. So
And
um
one that doesn't seem to translate well into our, waking reality, obviously, because when I dream, I go to a place that for some reason in my mind, and it's like almost every night, it's some place that's like in my mind it's California.
mhm.
I mean, clearly, I'm not going to California every night, but I mean, in my mind, when I'm there, and I don't live there. I have lived in California, but it's like it's just, and I wake up, it's like, oh, I was in California last night. I mean, it's inevitably I end up, having all kinds of experiences. But when I wake up, for some reason, in the back of my mind, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
What's the most uh, don't tell me Sedona is also the most frightening place.
Well, I would say the Bradshaw Ranch would be frightening if you camped out overnight. I'm not that adventurous.
What would you what would
I'm
you what would you be afraid of if you camped out there overnight? Because
well,
now you're going to get a bunch of adventurers
oh,
who would say to
I
themselves,
know.
let's go camping at the Bradshaw Ranch overnight.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you would get because they had ships land. Bob saw a ship land in broad daylight and it freaked him out. He turned around, went right back in the house. It literally was landed right there. They've had little grays running around the property at night that they've seen as well. The son would go um, hiking, and he got abducted a few times and then was left somewhere far away, and they were worried about him, and then he finally like found the phone, and now they ended up getting him early in the morning, and he did regressions and stuff. I put some of that in the actual UFO hotspot just because it brings in more things about what happens in these different varying places. um, but I think, the most frightening, I think, is the Pascagoula incident. which Calvin Parker, who just
Uh-huh.
passed
Just passed
away.
away, yeah.
Yeah, I worked with him and his publisher on that section to really get it. He was so terrified of this female alien who he said was, the devil herself. And I talked to him. I said, Calvin, you just got to tell me what did she look like? What did he goes? I can't speak it. If I speak it, I will make her real again, and I don't want her coming back. And I asked Philip if his publisher, Philip Mantle, if he had ever he said nope, he has never told anyone. That is the one secret he has kept. He has told what they did to him and those that what she did to him and those kinds of things. But that's just a fascinating one with the weird robots and
Well,
you
it is,
know
and it reminds me of there was a guy named Carl Higdon. You may remember him. He was actually from Wyoming, and he had an experience in the I think it was a Medicine Bow National Forest where he was essentially abducted, I guess, if you will, and ran into these beings that had strange cones for hands. They had necks that just ran straight up to their heads. I think they kind of a just straight neck, no chin, kind of thing. And it reminded me quite a bit, especially the sort of phenomena that happened around it. Reminded me a lot of the Pascagoula incident, almost as if perhaps they could have been, of the same tribe, if you will.
yeah.
But you've never heard of the Carl Higdon incident?
Mm-mm.
Oh yeah, it was actually Dave Politis just covered it in his new film, the Missing 411, the UFO connection, and he talks about the Carl Higdon case in there. But the beings that Carl, you know, uh, encountered seem really similar to those, So, but you never got an explanation or a description of the female, huh? I know,
No.
I know. For some reason, I thought that he had described. I didn't realize that he was so terrified. I'm wondering if she was really good looking. Because I've ran into really, pretty girls that I thought maybe could have been the devil incarnate.
Oh, that's funny.
uh, well, where can people get your book, Craig?
They if they want autographed copies or autographed copies for their loved ones or anything for Christmas, they can go to my website. It's autobiography of ofanet.com. On the homepage, I have my book series. There's 4 books, and then if they hit the other books tab, it'll go to the ET Almanac and the UFO Hotspot Compendium, and they can order it there. You just email me, tell me who you want me to sign it to. Otherwise, they're all on Amazon. They're on Kindle, audio, the little discs and things. I don't, people buy the discs like crazy. They're already sold out again.
Wow.
I mean, I thought people would just buy it on regular audiobook, but no, they're buying it on, the 8 discs that it comes on. So,
So they can
um,
listen to them at night while they're driving.
yeah, but you can listen to it on an audiobook while you're driving too. So,
Well, that's pretty interesting. Well, I, I,
yeah,
I really appreciate it, Craig, and we will include all of those links in the description to the video. Okay.
beautiful. Thank you.
Now, I really appreciate you being here, and I'll be back in just a few moments with some afterthoughts. Some of you may have been wondering where the podcast has been for a little while. Well, the explanation is not an excuse, but the explanation is that I'm the only one that does it. I don't have a crew. I don't have a production staff. And my father got sick about a year ago in November and developed brain cancer. He passed away in September, but we spent all this last year. I spent all this last year taking care of my father and being happy and honored to do so during his last months on this earth. It made me realize how precious life is, and at the same time, how strange life can be, how things happen that you don't plan for. And that is really what makes life worth living. And on the other hand, it can also make life worth dreading because you never know what's around the corner. And it's not always a great big happy surprise. But my dad was a great guy. And one of the things he taught us, one of the things he told us in the end was to live in the moment, to live and be where we're at right now, and to follow our passions. And my passion is getting to the bottom of this mystery. And so I determined after Dad left that I was going to spend a lot more time than I have already, like I haven't spent enough time on this. Try to get to the bottom of, or at least find out what more I can about what lies at the bottom of the UFO UAP mystery. So I hope you can all come along. I hope to have more guests. I hope to do some more news and informational type segments. And I apologize sincerely for my absence. I don't feel sorry for myself, and I don't expect anyone else to feel sorry for me because all of our loved ones pass, as we do. And I have become more and more interested in things like consciousness and the continuation of life beyond the physicality or the physical world that we are familiar with, and wondering whether that is true or not, and exploring what that afterlife might be if it exists. I'm still open-minded, what you might call an agnostic, but I am also a scientist, and so we have to keep our minds, our eyes peeled on the prize. And we also have to continue to use the scientific method in those things that we endeavor to understand. Our sincere thanks to Craig Campobasso for joining us here tonight on the official MUFON podcast. We look forward to seeing him again. And thank you for joining us here tonight. We'll see you next time, right here on the official MUFON podcast.